The idea that you can have a group of people with a national identity who aren't able to exercise their right to self-determination and not expect them to continually form resistance, you know, organizations that are terrorist in nature is probably a little dumb. There's no point in like reharping on it, but Hassan, a million percent should be banned for that. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I don't get it. I don't get it.
Iran used to, the Iranian revolutionary government used to enjoy sending rockets into Israel from Gaza using its proxy Hamas. Hamas is almost completely destroyed. Its cowardly leader, Yahya Sinwar, is hiding in a tunnel somewhere in the south of Gaza, surrounded by what he would regard as hostages.
Yep, surrounded by 22 hostages, reportedly.
That's what they were told they were on the right side of history as they were chasing Jews across campus shouting, "Go back to Poland." Do you think you might have been the bad guys?
Oh, fuck, that fell. To be fair, like, how many students were really chanting "Go back to Poland"? Like, like, clearly there's some people who just, like, think that, like, there's a fucking, something, like, they see a lot of dead people and they're like, oh, genocide, bad. They see the fucking racist statements that some Israeli fucking cabinet members make, and they're like, oh, genocide, bad, evil, stop it, and they understandably don't want to give arms to these people, so. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to help with the algorithm, and consider sending a donation through YouTube Super Thanks to directly support the channel, and I'll make sure to reply. We're gonna watch a little bit more. Yeah, let's play Dress to Impress, fuck it. A little more Hezbollah from Douglas Murray, because of course, I'm in VC. Okay, what? Why? Actually, banger game, of course. Why is everyone is the default? Okay, awesome. Douglas Murray's face. Yeah, we're gonna. It is of course. It is of course the anniversary of October 7th. There has not been there. We have to do the Hezbollah, of course. For the anniversary.
Now, when we planned tonight's conversation, I imagined that we would sort of be looking back, right? We were going to release it on October 7th, which is, I think today's Tuesday, which is next Monday. And I thought we were going to sort of be looking back at the past year from a slightly quieter vantage point. But then today happened. And quiet is sort of the last thing that's happening right now in the Middle East. The war that Iran has outsourced to its proxies since October 7th, 2023.
You're playing on-stream vids, YouTube channel called
Israel. Hours before we sat down right here in this room in
history?
New York City, Iran launched
No.
over 100 ballistic missiles toward Israel. Israel's 9 million citizens huddled in bomb shelters, many of them friends and family of many people in this room. A handful of them made direct impact, and as of this recording,
has Israel struck back yet?
One person was killed.
Israel said strikes in Lebanon, Gaza.
Walking on the street in Jericho. Just before that onslaught, of course, two terrorists, at least two of them, opened fire at the train station in Jaffa, killing at least 6 people and injuring at least 7 others. Now, for many of us in this room tonight, this war has been primary on our mind for the past 360 or so days. But I think for a lot of Americans, it still feels like a faraway war, right? And it isn't.
Also in the Middle East.
This is a battle for the free world. As our mutual friend Sam Harris
put in of course.
After October 7th, there are not many bright lines that divide good and evil in our world. This is one of them. This is a war, yes, between Israel and Iran, but it's also a war between civilization and barbarism. And that was true 360 some days ago.
Oh no, they're going to call him Islamophobic again. Oh no.
And yet, this testing moment has been met with alarming moral confusion. I want to choose just a few examples from the last week, and I'm sure everyone here will be familiar with these. At the UN, 12 countries, including the US, presented a plan for a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon without mentioning the word Hezbollah. Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib tweeted, "Our country is funding this bloodbath minutes after Israel assassinated the leader of the most fearsome terrorist army on the planet, Hassan Nasrallah, who the New York Times described as beloved, a towering figure, and a powerful orator." We read it out loud in my home. It sounded like a letter of recommendation. At Barnard, just 40 or so blocks from here, students chanted this week for an intifada moments after the Jewish community memorialized 6 civilian hostages murdered by Hamas. At Yale this week, students chanted from Gaza to Beirut, "All our martyrs."
Don't you know, intifada just means resistance.
Salute. In Ottawa,
if I think women LGBTQ people should have equal rights, does that make me Islamophobic?
"Oh Zionists, where are you?"
You gotta understand the cultural differences, clearly.
Why did they do that? Because it was a street with Jewish schools and home for the elderly. And that's just a few examples from the past week. The reason we are sitting here having this conversation is because no one that I know understands the moral urgency of this moment better than you, Douglas Murray. Now, you're not Jewish. You have no Israeli family members, although I know a lot of Israeli families that consider you an adoptive family member. And yet, it is you, more than almost anyone in the world, who has articulated the stakes of this war and the moral clarity that it requires. Douglas's
what
work
else is
as a reporter
tropical?
has taken him to Iraq, North Korea, northern Nigeria, Ukraine, and most recently, of course, to Israel, where he became a celebrity. You cannot walk down the streets of Tel Aviv without Douglas Murray. It's like being with the Beatles, and I'm not exaggerating. And you decided to stay, a conversation I want to have with you, to cover most of that war. You're also the best-selling author of 7 books, and you're a regular contributor at the New York Post, which is the paper of record in New York City, the National Review, and most importantly, I think, at the Free Press, where you write the beloved Sunday column, Things Worth Remembering, which is reason enough to become a paid Free Press subscriber. There's just no one I would rather be sitting with in this moment, as we are watching in real time the Middle East and really the world transform before our eyes. So Douglas Murray,
there it
welcome
is.
to Honestly, and thanks so much for being here.
Great pleasure to be with you, Barry.
Okay, so we are speaking on the eve of what some people, and I'm sure your phone was blowing up in the way mine was all afternoon, of what some people are saying this is it. Like, this is the beginning of World War III. At the very least, this is the moment, sort of, that we've, in a weird way, been waiting for, if you can say such a thing, since October 7th. This is the mask-off moment. And I guess the first question I want to ask you is, how did we get here? How did we get to a moment where Iran is dropping 100 ballistic missiles on Israel, and Israel is vowing to respond to it? What are the factors that led us to this moment?
Probably just like the Finland station, the terrible decision to allow a train to arrive in Russia in 1917 carrying Lenin, the plane that took off in 1979 from Paris, taking to Tehran the Ayatollah Khomeini, is one of the 2 worst journeys of the 20th century. And all of this starts from there. Iran had the opportunity to be a sort of progressive country in the region. In the 1970s, Israel had an ambassador in Iran, as you know. There was the opportunity for normalization along the same lines as what happened between Israel and Egypt, Israel and Jordan.
I was just going to mention the Islamic Revolution, right?
The revolutionary Islamic government in Tehran chose a different path. It's a millenarian and apocalyptic terror movement that has immiserated the people of Iran since what is also coincidentally the year of my birth.
And to be fair, we did coup Iran, the U.S. and British, right? When they tried to nationalize our fucking oil companies there in 1953, I think it was 1953 or 1954, one of them. And the Shah was probably not a great dude, but he did try to nationalize our fucking oil. So you know what? Fuck him, clearly.
And the revolutionary Islamic government has decided to oppress the people it presumes to govern and try to expand itself across the region. And my worry early in the period after October 7th was that Israel would spend all of its political and military capital defeating Hamas. And I never thought that that was the aim. I thought that the aim was to defeat Hamas and then make sure that every other terror proxy of Iran, of the Iranian revolutionary government, as I should always remember to say, and as I always remind my good Iranian friends that I should say, because we shouldn't say it's Iran, it's not, it's that disgusting regime. My worry was always that Hamas would take up all of the energy and that Israel wouldn't be allowed, as it were, to do what else needed to be done. Almost a year on, we could look back with all of the grief and sadness and horror about what happened on the 7th and the losses of many fine soldiers fighting Hamas house to house in Gaza. But as it happens, as we come to the first anniversary, the tide has turned. And the Israeli government and the Israeli armed forces and military have shown that there is a price to pay to eradicate the Jewish people. And the price is being paid, and it's high, and it should always have been high, and it will probably get higher. This is a point of clarification. The Iranian revolutionary government used to enjoy sending rockets into Israel from Gaza using its proxy Hamas. Hamas is almost completely destroyed. Its cowardly leader, Yahya Sinwar, is hiding in a tunnel somewhere in the south of Gaza, surrounded by what he would regard as hostages.
Yep, surrounded by 22 hostages, reportedly. 3 stars. Handcuffs to 22 hostages, supposedly. Yeah, I guess this is true, but
that's his end. But his colleagues, his comrades, they've all gone. They've lost. They're in the dust of Gaza. No one misses them.
Oh, the point I was going to bring up, like, it's obviously hard to fucking get rid of a terrorist movement like this, like a counterinsurgency movement like this. The problem right now is that they're playing I think U.S. intelligence has said as much. Well, it's a horrible fucking outfit that they've done basically what they can do to destroy Hamas. Now it's a game of like whack-a-mole where they have to basically strike wherever Hamas reconstitutes itself. Like, I think they were like moving more troops to the north because I think Hamas is like reconstituting itself in the north again for like a 3rd time. But
in the north, Hezbollah was meant to be the great army of the Tehran mullahs. in less than 2 weeks, Hezbollah has been utterly destroyed. First of all, 3,000 of their...
And Jabalia, which I'm pretty sure they've struck like Jabalia like 3 times by now.
Operatives had the misfortune, believing as they may have been right to believe they couldn't trust their cell phones, decided to go to the old-fashioned pager devices. But someone put explosives in all of those pager devices. And so 3,000 of their operatives in one moment across Lebanon and Syria all suffered grievous injury.
Third time a charm, maybe. Who knows?
By day 3, they couldn't trust to put on a kettle in Beirut. Then the senior membership of Hezbollah that still remained met in a building, and then they were struck. Then, best of all, when Benjamin Netanyahu came to New York last week, went on stage to the UN, I watched from the gallery as the traditional walkout of various despots and dictators and their minions occurred. As he was doing it, somewhere in Beirut, Hassan Nasrallah was watching Benjamin Netanyahu on television, and that's when Hassan Nasrallah went to meet his maker.
It's like the baptism scene from The Godfather.
It's
It is.
I was told by a Jewish friend the other day that apparently there is something in Torah, the Jewish tradition, that says that one should not take enormous delight in the decimation of one's foes. But I'm not Jewish. and so I don't have to follow this. Hassan Nasrallah and the other people...
Did you not know that? Yeah, Nasrallah was killed. I got last? Ain't no fucking way I should have gotten last. Are you kidding me, bro? Against these people? Fuck these people. Voting rigged.
Who have just also gone to the dust. Have not just spent recent decades.
Wait, when? Like a week or 2 ago at this point. Or not 2 weeks. It was like maybe 4 days ago or something. Yeah. And then his replacement, his presumed replacement, I don't think they officially named him his replacement, but his replacement, his cousin got killed. I don't know if Hezbollah confirmed that he's killed yet, but Israel said they killed him, and then Hezbollah said that they had, quote, lost contact with him. So maybe he's just on vacation, you know.
Killing Israelis, kidnapping them from the border regions, firing rockets at people in communities across the north of Israel. They killed 241 American Marines in 1983, and they got away with it. They killed French soldiers. They killed many other foreign nationals. They killed people. They kidnapped them. And they got away with it. Not anymore. As Benjamin Netanyahu said in Congress in July,
it's been out of context since Friday.
Is your war. Our fight is your fight, and our victory will be your victory.
It's targeted him.
That's Hezbollah, the organization formerly known as Hezbollah, whatever we will have to call them. They've lost almost all of the ammunition they've stored up to fire at Israel all these decades. The United Nations was meant to oversee a resolution. I remember I was there in the war in 2006, and I remember the war finishing, and I remember the United Nations all calling for a ceasefire again, and all of the years afterwards it turns out, lo and behold, you don't have to follow United Nations resolutions if you don't want to. And Hezbollah did not want to, so they built up their rocket arsenal, and most of that has been destroyed in recent days. So that's Iran's proxy to the north. The Houthis in Yemen, everyone's favourite new terrorists, recently discovered by morons on American campuses, well, they're not doing too well either. Because it turns out that if you do the bidding of your paymasters in Tehran, and you fire missiles at Israel, you'll be taken out too. So now is a point of clarification. The mullahs in Tehran do not any longer have active proxies able to try to destroy the Jewish state. They've gone in Gaza. They've gone in Lebanon. In the process of going. They're going in Yemen. So it's the mullahs versus Israel.
So what happens next? I mean, you are deeply, deeply sourced in Israel, and you become somewhat close, I think, to the prime minister, who has said in sort of no uncertain terms...
Oh no, is he a Netanyahu fan?
He's also been saying that for a while. It's only now become more and more explicit. What do you think the next few weeks looks like, if you can share that?
Well, if I can't speak for the Prime Minister, but I would just say that it seems obvious that if...
Houthis music? Is that the one that Hassan showed to fucking Nick whoever? Yeah, I've seen it.
To reply in kind. But the Israeli way of
war... I think
war
at least, if it's the same one.
A way of war that is, of course, for them it's existential. As Golda Meir famously said, we can't afford to lose once. And the mullahs have made their choice. Is it possible that they could be punished in a way that would be something which would topple the regime? Maybe. I don't know if Israel can do that alone or if America needs to do it with them. But just imagine what the region would look like if that flight had not been allowed to land in 1979. All of this would have...
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, it's wild. Dude, Hassan should be banned. I've said this before, like when it initially happened, like there's no point in like reharping on it, but Hassan... A million percent should be banned for that. Are you kidding me? I don't get it.
Another state. But the mullahs chose their route, and they're losing.
Well, let's talk about America. And
this is horrible. I'm not winning this one, chat.
Joe Biden has declared he's a Zionist. America still Israel's most important ally. It gives it tons of foreign aid, and we could go
Platform
on
and
and
actual
on.
terror. I know. It's not even. He's not even. The issue is he's so cowardly. Like, if you want to be pro-terrorism, own it. Own it. Say, I hate Israel. I want the Houthis to attack Israel because I fucking hate Israel and I hope the Zionists die. Own it. Don't bring an uneducated, non-political streamer on your stream and then lie to him multiple times to be like, yeah, the Houthis are just enforcing their territorial water, and act like this is some legitimate thing. If you want to be pro-terrorism, just own it. Just own it. Just say it. Just say it. People are like, half your chat's going to fucking agree with you. Just say it. Own it. Don't be like, I tweeted about this, but like, I already showed it on stream, not watching it. It's why, like, what he did was, like, he was talking to, like, the Nick guy and was like, the Houthis said that they're going to enforce their territorial waters and not allow any Israeli ships through. Motherfucker, one, the Houthis aren't the government of Yemen. They can't enforce things. Don't lie and say this is fucking, like, a legally enforceable thing. Two, there was a second point, but, I remember also, like, ships, it's innocent passage. Ships are guaranteed innocent passage. It's just so wild to me that, like, Hassan will be, like, against economic warfare in any other case, but as soon as it's against Israel, as soon as it's against Israel and by a terrorist organization, he's somehow for it. Own it. Be pro-terrorism openly. Don't, like, lie to your viewers and lie to uneducated streamers about how the Houthis are doing a morally legitimate thing. Like
this White House on that score. But on the other hand, you can make a very different argument, which is,
anyway,
you could argue that the roots of what we're seeing play out tonight over the skies of Israel goes back to the Obama administration and to an embrace of a sort of rapprochement with Iran. I wonder.
Oh no, is he against the Iran deal too?
The past 24 hours.
Maybe I've said this before. We need to do a reading stream of the Iran deal at some point.
Kind of,
I don't know if it was effective or not. I would lean towards it was probably being effective, but I don't know for sure.
Fully shattered and collapsed, or are we still going to have to pretend as if? Well, you tell me.
Well, you know Herb Stein's law: things that cannot go on won't. It's a law that economists are fond of. In foreign policy establishment, things that cannot go on usually do. There are two completely defunct paradigms which are still being pursued in Washington, Paris, and London. Number one, that if you give the Palestinians yet another state, by which I mean not being given a state in 2005 in Gaza isn't enough, and everything they've done since isn't enough. Let's give them another one.
They would. I wouldn't say they were giving me a state, but I understand his point there, but it's a little misleading.
And the next time they won't decide to do a genocidal state again. First thing is this idea that Anthony Blinken said a couple of days after the 7th of October, this is why we need to double down on the two-state solution. What, you want another Palestinian state in order to become another terror state? And you reward them for the terror by giving them another state? That's delusion number one. Delusion number two is this idea that, and my gosh, the Obama administration was the worst of this, was this idea that you wait for the moderate reformer to appear under the mullahs in Tehran.
I'm definitely not winning this one. My alpha's trash. Anyway, I feel like I'm probably going to disagree with him on the first point. Like, the idea that you can have my nails are fucking red. The idea that you can have a group of people with a national identity who aren't able to exercise their right to self-determination and not expect them to continually form resistance, organizations that are terrorist in nature is probably a little dumb. There probably needs to be I should have voted higher than that, a genuine exercise. Can you explain the right to self-determination? My understanding is that the UN Charter grants like most groups, I actually don't know how they define it. Grants, I think it's ethnic groups. I don't know. Grants every person the right to self-determination to determine, does it say ethnic groups in the UN Charter? I'm trying to remember now. The right to determine how their country is organized. Every
single Iranian president in my lifetime who has come, every prime minister, every foreign minister, is always, the reformist. I mean, it's not even reformist in the,
all people have the right to self-determination. By virtue of their right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, cultural development. A peoples. That's not useful.
The hardline is to kill all the Jews and the reformists to kill most. It's not even that.
Do you really think a two-state solution would stop them?
They don't come.
So, probably. It depends on how it'd be implemented. assuming the two-state solution is an actual solution, then I would guess the conflict would essentially die down for the most part. Assuming like the issue is like it's a meme. Oh, you know, there's a reason like Palestinians have never been offered a fully sovereign state is because like obviously Israel is concerned that if they were to grant Palestinians like statehood overnight, a fully sovereign state overnight, then Iran would just build military bases there, and they would pose an even greater threat to Israel than they currently do. I'm voting for because she has a cat. But assuming you can implement a two-state solution that actually has like the, you know, we're going to grant Israel access to the Jordan River for 5 years, and then we're going to lease it. They're going to, you know, have long-term leases after that. And you can do provisions like that, then yeah, it'd probably work.
The regime is set up in such a way they don't come. It was always a delusion of the Obama administration and others. You could coax the Ayatollahs to the table. They don't want to be at the table. If they wanted to be at the table, if they wanted to be this reformist thing, they wouldn't have set up this death trap in southern Lebanon, which, in my view, and the view of many others, was always there in order to get the opportunity.
Oh, I didn't get last?
Atomic weapons.
Oh, yes, I did.
Genocidal weaponry to fire at the Jewish state and have Hezbollah there in order to make sure that Israel and America...
It's an argument for having to do with self-determination with the Ukrainian war. People say Russia's immediately is emerging their rightful ethnic and underworld country. Yeah, it's dumb.
Illusion.
People point to like the Russian like language law, which is like cringe. It's probably really not as bad people say. It's dumb.
These people all thought this was the case. They've been proven wrong again and again. And in recent days and weeks, we've had the spectacle of people who have never had to see a war, let alone fight one, saying all the time that Israel has to go for a ceasefire. They were flat out wrong.
What?
Kamala Harris said, don't go into Rafah. Rafah was the stronghold of Hamas in Gaza. The IDF went into Rafah. They got a lot more of the senior leadership of Hamas, as we knew they would. They got some more hostages back. But Kamala Harris said she looked at the maps and she knew better because, I mean, after all, nobody in the IDF has ever looked at the maps, I'm sure. And then in recent days, we have the situation with Lebanon. It's all, the Israelis are attacking Lebanon. No, they are freeing Lebanon from Hezbollah. Lebanon used to be a relatively progressive and prosperous country for the region. It had many Christians, among others, and an extraordinary, even the Middle East, an unbelievable petri dish.
Wait, what period is he talking about? Street wars or streetwear? I thought it said street war.
And they have been decimated by Hezbollah, by the Shiite militia of Iran in Lebanon. And Israel goes in to get Hezbollah out, and the American government says ceasefire. No, not ceasefire. Victory. Should always have been about victory. You cannot keep fighting wars that you're not allowed to win. And that's what I said from the very first moment after the 7th. Every single time Israel is made to fight wars it is not allowed to win. We in the international community were expected to see it as normal that every 15 to 20 years Israel had to fight a war in southern Lebanon. Every 2 to 3 years it had to fight a war in Gaza. Why? Every single time because the international community, including American administrations, tried to stop them and did stop them before the moment of victory. There was an Israeli politician and general who I spoke with early in this conflict who said, I had the opportunity to snuff out Hamas entirely in 2010, and I was pulled back by my government at the demand of the American government and the international community. Well done, those people. Well done, the people who sustained.
I mean, obviously, the concern here usually is escalation, right? I mean, we've reached a point where clearly, I mean, okay, we could imagine a case where like Israel did agree to a ceasefire, right? And Hamas agreed to a ceasefire, which is, Hamas probably doesn't want a ceasefire at this point because they are probably banking on the fact that a regional conflict is going to benefit them eventually. Clearly, we could imagine a case where Israel did accept a ceasefire, and then tensions in the region would die down, and they wouldn't have to deal with Lebanon, and they wouldn't have to deal with Iran for a little bit at least. But I mean, I don't know. I probably agree for this fucking overall point here. So,
status quo. It meant we had war after war, and now they have this. This is the fruit of their labor.
We now know from Financial Times reporting over the past few days that Israel, in the days after October 7th, had a way, or they believe they had a way, to get Nasrallah, and the Americans stopped them. And there's story after story about how the Americans sort of interceded. And the theme that emerges for me is they seem to view not the terrorist group, not Iran, not Islamic totalitarianism as the enemy, but escalation itself as the enemy.
Yes, and the problem is that when you need to win a war, you need to escalate. Absolutely, you need to escalate. And, I mean, by the way, I don't know. Everything I ever know about, when I read a story about it in the Financial Times, they're always wrong. It's possible they might have something to do with Ecuadorian politics every now and then. I don't know. But on anything I know about it, the Financial Times doesn't seem to me to be a very, very respectful journal. But maybe they're right. I heard that rumor from elsewhere. Of course, the whole thing is always about de-escalation. Always de-escalation. This is this madness, as again, of people, governments drunk on peace, thinking that peace
Probably
is
be
the
able
only
to
thing
defend
that should
itself
ever happen.
against
And
the
we,
US
you don't need to go
assault.
back to Ecclesiastes to know this, but perhaps we can. To everything, there is
Oh.
under the sun, there is a season. And the list includes a time of war and a time of peace. This is a time of war, and it was a war started by the mullahs in Tehran when they decided to send their barbarians into Israel on the 7th to rape and burn and murder their way. They chose the war. The Israelis want a time of peace. Most people in the region want a time of peace, but in order to get to peace, you have to get to victory in war.
Speaking of publications you admire,
Truly don't know how to
something from the
justify
BBC,
nationalism.
today.
What do you mean by nationalism?
Shortly after Iran launched these ballistic missiles against Israel, one of its commentators said this, and I promise you it is not satire. The international community has to make sure that whatever Israel does is not upending the regional order as we know it. We've been in this for 12 months now, of constant red lines being crossed, mostly by the Israelis. Hezbollah and Iran have played it fairly rationally, trying to always be cautious in how they respond, trying to leave off-ramps where they could.
Yeah, I know. This is a. By the way, this moron is a teacher
I don't know.
at King's College in London. He worked for 4 years for the Qatari government. He was in the pay of the Qatari government. He now teaches at King's College London, which is funded by the Qataris. Why the British Broadcasting Corporation should be inviting on people who are in the pay of Qatar, which is the mini terror state.
De-splitting land masses arbitrarily up to foreign countries. I don't know. They're probably like, I mean, we'll take Israel as the example, right? Like, there are probably reasons, like certain like ethnic groups feel like they probably want a country to themselves to protect themselves from places where historically they've been like, you know, subjugated. Like Israel would literally be like the example of this, or like Kurdistan as well. They don't have they don't have a state. They have, I mean, their autonomous zone in Syria because Syria's in a fucking shit show civil war. But I don't know.
I know, it's so sad. It's so sad that the regional status quo of firing missiles at Israel can't be retained, isn't it? It's barbaric, isn't it? The same thing happened on after one of the recent bouts in against Hezbollah. One of the BBC Sky commentators said that Hezbollah had been appallingly provoked by Israel. Provoked beyond toleration, really. Poor Hezbollah. There they were, simply wanting to launch rockets in peace. and then they got disrupted. It's beastly. Absolutely beastly. No, the status quo that has existed was rancid and rotten and anti-Israel, and it had no right to continue. But these people, I mean, we have to ask ourselves in all these institutions, how do you end up with one of these Qatari stooges that are Qatari funded?
Like utilitarian, alternative tribalism,
kind
of like taking up employees until your staff is so full, so to speak.
It's rot all the way down. Rot in the media, supported by rotted institutions of rotten states like Qatar, which think they've bought us.
Damn.
And maybe they have.
Oh, we should turn that round. They think they own us. They are one of the weakest states in the world. It's a few 100,000 people
and yet
with a disgusting crime family at its head, and the people own slave after slave in that country. It's a slave-owning state with a couple of 100,000 people who actually have some money, and they think they've bought America and Britain? Seriously?
Well, we're cheap. That's the lesson I'm taking from the fact that some of our greatest universities are willing to have outposts in these countries.
Yeah,
what the fuck is an ethnic group actually, Ball? No, it's a good question.
Hit someone in this.
I don't know. I don't have a good way to find that. I don't think anyone
agents, but on the Qatari payroll in some way.
Yeah.
How is that allowed to happen?
Well, look, it seems to be.
Wait, what did they say about the Qatari payroll?
Players, our sports teams,
Yes,
spit,
yes.
and you will hit someone in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's a paid up. I don't know. We're not going to say a Qatari agent, but on the Qatari payroll in some way.
Yeah.
How is that allowed to happen?
Does that what? I mean, Qatar's like a, you know, like a, you know, rich, like a rich oil country. I would assume that they do things like invest in sports teams. I don't know if I would. Qatar, sovereign wealth fund, sports teams. The sovereign wealth fund invested Muhammad. I don't know why I immediately read Muhammad. Monumental Sports and Entertainment. The parent company, yeah, like.
Well, look, it seems to be quite easy to seize Russian assets if you don't like Vladimir Putin's actions in recent years. Fine, get the Qataris. Why not?
Like they're an oil, like they're an oil company that diversifies with you know, investments into fucking sports companies. Like that's what Qatar is.
By the international community that has some moral clarity on some issues some of the time, that you're not allowed to roll tanks into Ukraine and try to seize Ukraine, and as a result of that, all these people associated with Vladimir Putin had those super yachts taken. Fine, show the Qataris how it's done. Take their stuff, seize it. See how they run as a state when they can't protect themselves, and see whether their slave class that they import to literally act as slaves in the 21st century are going to stay around.
Muhammad Sports Entertainment.
They think we're vulnerable. We make them vulnerable.
But the
what
fact
type
that
of fucking streetwear?
The West in the way that they have,
Yes, 'cause
with
we're
such
weak.
ease, shows our weakness.
Yes, because we're weak and we're silly and we're drunk on peace.
let's get back to that in a minute. I want to ask you one question about Ukraine since you brought it up. One, I wouldn't even call it an emergent phenomenon. I think it's now become the consensus on large portions of the American right, is that Israel, let's support that war, but Ukraine, let's give up on those guys, to be very crude about it. I would say Israel has become almost a conservative cause, and Ukraine has become a liberal cause. And I find this quite strange, because the way that I see it, these two conflicts are profoundly and deeply linked. But you're a conservative, and many of your fellow conservatives no longer see it that way. What are they seeing? And what's the case you would make to them that the cause of Ukraine should also be the cause of those that support Israel?
Well, of course, Ukraine is obvious, and it's a sort of rather basic lesson from the 20th century that you shouldn't be allowed to roll tanks into other countries with impunity. Used to be rather widely recognized, and also.
I mean, they're speaking in big macro views right now. Hey, didn't get last this time.
Start redrawing the borders of the outskirts of Europe, because you can open up an awful lot of old enmities that way. There's quite a lot of trouble in that part of the world.
But tell that to J.D. Vance or Donald Trump.
Well, I think they get that. I think that the problem that's happened with the right on Ukraine is, well, you're right that it's become a sort of left-wing shibboleth. You know, that people who never.
Tankies, we probably want to give them. No, tankies don't want to give up both force. Tankies want to. Tankies want us to nuke Israel ourselves, and to give up on Ukraine essentially.
That put up the black square in 2020 and then put the pronouns in their bio, then put up the Ukraine flag, ergo we shouldn't support Ukraine.
Exactly, which is all true, and I mean there are a lot of irritating people out there. But just because people are irritating doesn't mean you form your foreign policy in opposition to irritating people.
Sorry,
that has changed on the right with Ukraine, as I see it, is that after the spring offensive last year failed, and it did fail, it was not clear that Ukraine was going to continue to be able to seize land back from Putin. I was with the Ukrainian armed forces when they retook Kherson and Mykolaiv, and it was a very heady time. But there were not further land gains like that. And when the spring offensive failed, I think quite a lot of people thought, it's likely this is, I mean, Henry Kissinger, among others, said this at the time, it seems that there's going to be some kind of negotiated settlement that will include a change of borders in the region. And once people started to see that, then yes, a lot of support fell away. And by the way, when you see the people on the left saying, we will support Ukraine till the absolute end, no, they won't. The Germans have already been pulling back. They fall away. And this is, by the way, one of the things about war. There is nothing at all that compares with winning. If you don't win, that's everything. Shortly after the 7th, the rabbi in London is a very nice man, but he's reform. And I'm a non-Jewish ultra-Orthodox Jew.
Sitting in the front row, our host, I should say, is a reform rabbi.
I know, but I have my criticisms anyway. I mean, but
we'll get you the black hat.
A very nice reform rabbi said to me, I sometimes worry, Douglas, that you talk about things in a way that's too binary. And, things aren't binary. And I said, well, actually, some things are. And he said, like what? I said, win, lose. That's it.
True.
Give me a clearer binary.
I mean, like, clearly...
won it. You lose it, got nothing to stand on. It's over. You don't own your own land, and you don't have your own army. You can't protect your family. You can't stop your people being killed.
That's a little over simplistic. Clearly, we could imagine, like, a no clear win-loss scenario for a war, or like a negotiated settlement that has, trade-offs on both sides.
Now look, Ukraine has, as I say, fallen into a sort of torpor as a war, and a lot of people want to end it, and a lot of people think it'll probably just have to be settled by some gruesome and difficult land swap. Who knows? Israel is different on this because there is the glimpse back.
I'm playing Dress to Impress. You guys don't know what Dress to Impress is?
And that is what makes these conflicts at this stage different. It makes it wildly different because it is clear at this point how this war in the Middle East could end. And it's possible also, and this perhaps doesn't get said often enough, it's possible once again to see what the Middle East could look like if these two delusions fell away. If instead of everyone obsessing about the Palestinians getting another state, they thought about improving the living conditions of the Palestinians. If instead of talking about the importance of...
In my view, those two things would probably go hand in hand, right? I would imagine Palestinians getting a state would probably end up increasing their living conditions. I would imagine. I would guess.
Of bringing Iran in from the cold, the mullahs in from the cold, we talked about. If Washington had spent 1% of the time it has spent...
Ukraine will have to end with some kind of land exchange. If the Russian military fails to push back the Kurds region, it looks increasingly likely. Yeah, it seems like it'll probably...
Every American government for 30 years has been trying to get Benjamin Netanyahu out of office. Bill Clinton sent teams of people over to get Netanyahu to lose the election in the 90s. When Netanyahu says in his memoirs, Bill Clinton calls him up to congratulate him after he wins the prime ministership, gets together the coalition, and Bill Clinton says, well, we did everything we could to keep you out, but We're looking forward to working.
Space Bill Clinton.
It has been American government policy to change the prime minister in Israel. Whatever you think of him, he's the one who can put together coalitions. What have they done when the Iranian people took to the streets like in 2009? Nothing. So if you didn't have that terror regime...
Does it mean what did the U.S. government do when Iranian people went to the street? I'm pretty sure we I'm pretty sure we do give money to... U.S. gives money to Iranian protesters. I thought we did dedicate money to...
regime oppressing the people of Iran and spreading their terror around the region. Look at what's possible. Look at what Bahrain has achieved in recent years. Look at what Saudi has been able to achieve in recent years.
Resistance groups.
I never thought would be seen in generations in terms of liberalization. Now, does it yet look like Berkeley? No, thank God. And I always like to think there might be somewhere in liberal terms between Riyadh and Berkeley. If we can find that civilizational G-spot, let's do it. But Saudi has done extraordinary things, and the same with the Emiratis. I mean, you have Israelis holidaying in the UAE, and you have international businesses doing business in Saudi. You have pop concerts in Saudi again. I mean, okay, it feels like, yeah, well, we were there a while ago, fine. This was a society that had not caught up with the 8th century until a few years ago, and it's coming into the 21st century. And there is this opportunity to say, look, how about if everything normalized, look at what the Israelis could do with these countries in terms of water supplies, or technology, or crops, or new energy, or all of these things.
Boom. Look, I'm right. Always right. This was 1995. There's an American nonprofit organization established in 1995 with grants from the National Endowment for Democracy to promote regime change in Iran. The former... Okay, maybe this isn't what I'm thinking. I swear we gave money to those fucking feminist groups that were in Iran protesting or whatever.
Look at what's possible.
Entities replace covert CIA activities.
It does not involve the mullahs in Tehran having power, and it is not predicated on Mahmoud Abbas or the PA or whatever comes next in Gaza.
I'm always first.
Creating the perfect Palestinian state. The region cannot wait for that. It has waited for that for decades, and the Palestinian leadership has never been serious about it. It never wanted it. It walked away like it walked away in 1947, 1948. And again, I mean, I'm a little hard line on this at this point, but I believe that if you have kept being offered a state and you have kept waging war, you do not continue to have the right to keep on being handed state after state after state. If the Palestinians want another state, they should earn it, as everybody else has, as Israel did. But by the way,
how did Israel earn their state?
Washington still, where it's like, let's give them more.
I mean, like, Israel earned their state through violence. I mean, I understand that he's going to argue the violence that was instigated by the other side in this case, but sure, like.
But what do you do if you're Israel? In other words, I don't disagree with the idea that if the Palestinians of the West Bank were given a state tomorrow, that would likely turn toward Hamas, and then
at best it'll be another failed Arab state, and most likely it'll just be another Iranian proxy state. So well done, all you kids on campus who thought that everything in the world would unfurl into peace if another rotten state was created in the Middle East.
But then occupation forever?
No.
Then what?
That's for the Israeli government to work out, among others. And by the way, one of the things about the Palestinian question, to my mind, is that just take Gaza for the time being. It's very hard to know what you do with Gaza now. I don't think the Israelis should reoccupy it. I'm very nervous about the fact that there will almost certainly have to be IDF at the Philadelphia corridor, because my colleague and friend Natasha House...
Who is this racist Aryan Zionist man? This is Douglas Murray.
The strip between
great way of describing him.
And Egypt, a piece of land that most Western journalists seem to not know exists. But anyway, I'm nervous about the fact that IDF will have to be at the Philadelphia corridor, but they have to be because, as Natasha showed me the photographs the other day,
the tunnels that ran under them.
The tunnels I've seen in Gaza in the last year are for military-sized vehicles to drive through, driving rockets and ammunition into Gaza, and they're all under Egyptian army checkpoints. So obviously the Egyptians can't be trusted with that from stopping them getting in. So
I think there were nine tunnels at least. 9 tunnels, Gaza, Egypt, and these were the... Egypt had blocked cross-border tunnels before October 7th, says Israeli army. Shafts and 9 tunnels. There we go. Yeah, shafts and 9 tunnels found under Philadelphia corridor were closed before the war, contrary to Netanyahu's claims. Damn, no way. Netanyahu would lie? Why would he do that? None of the tunnels were believed to have been used for smuggling, contrary to the Israeli government claims that when were they closed? Puts the number of tunnels destroyed between 2018 Egyptian military. It says some of the tunnels reach a depth of 30 meters underground.
So, yes, there will have to be Israeli troops at the Philadelphia corridor. I'm very nervous about it, however, because I think that we will hear for many years of young men and women in the IDF patrolling that and getting shot or kidnapped by terrorists in Gaza. However, something has to be done for the people of Gaza, with the people of Gaza. I think they should hopefully have learned by now that there is a terrible price to pay for voting for a terrorist group to run you. And if something can be done, among other things, that you don't have groups like UNRWA teaching young Gazan kids, they had 18 years to run the Gaza, and they brought up a generation of sociopaths. They brought them up with math books that are like, if you kill 2 Jews and then kill 2 more Jews, how many dead Jews have you got? That's like math in Gaza. No amount of people.
I mean, like, there are... he's not entirely wrong. He's just, like, doing the, like, dumb intuition pump. He was apparently wrong about these 9 tunnels, though. Or I don't think he said 9. He just said tunnels at the Philadelphia corridor. They probably were closed by Egypt. Now that as the IDF maintains control of the entire city, Egypt owns the Philadelphia corridor. The combat engineers are completing their investigation of a few dozen Hamas tunnels that have not yet been demolished, and operation will take no longer than a few weeks, with seemingly no hostage deal, blah, 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 blah. Most of them have been destroyed. Okay, well, the other thing. All have been blocked before the IDF arrived. Yeah. Total 9 that are crossing Egypt, but every single one was blocked before the IDF arrived, either by Egyptian authorities or Hamas themselves. They've collapsed, they're not usable, they're not active. Like the other 8 tunnels, this one too was blocked up, once on the Egyptian side, the second time by Hamas inside Gaza. It's unclear why the terror group collapsed part of its own tunnel, but some military officials speculated that it was an attempt by Hamas to hide the fact that it did previously have some cross-border tunnels.
For years, and it was tolerated for years by the Americans and all the other Westerners as we poured money into these corrupt organizations. But it's not clear what you do about Gaza. But why should this be Israel's problem alone? If Washington doesn't have an answer for Gaza, and Egypt doesn't, and they don't want it back, and the rest of the world does, why would people keep on saying it's Israel's problem alone to solve? Whatever happens in Gaza should be a regional agreement with regional investment, regional security deals, but the absolute bottom line is never again will young Israelis have to lose their lives going in to fight another conflict to get Iranian rockets that have come through Egypt out of Gaza. This should be the last round. I said this at the beginning of this war. Will this be the umpteenth Gaza war or the last one? Will this be the 3rd Lebanon war or the last one? My hope is this is the last Gaza war, this is the last Lebanon war.
I want to go back to October of 2023 because there were 2 catastrophes of that week in October. The first, of course, was the Hamas pogrom, where 1,200 people were killed, more than 250 taken hostage, many of whom are still in
Oh shit, I'm gonna lose this one.
And the second was what started to happen and has continued to happen every day since October 8th, which was the sight of some of the most well-educated people in the West taking to the streets, waving Hamas flags, waving now Hezbollah flags, chanting glory to the martyrs. And now you have, by the way, the same moment that we're sitting here, I think today is the publication day of Ta-Nehisi Coates' new book, The Message, which is based on a 10-day trip that he took to what he calls Palestine.
Well, it's quite interesting that Ta-Nehisi Coates, for the first time in his life, has decided to write about something other than his specialized subject, which is himself.
No, it's still about himself.
Oh, it is?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Because, I mean, this is somebody who wrote his first book. It was a memoir, and it was about how incredibly prejudiced against he was. My view, when your first book, and you have no public presence before, is a memoir, I mean, you're doing pretty well in the publishing world. If your second book is also a memoir, you're doing really well. So, yeah, it's interesting that Coates should have applied himself the most complex question in international geopolitics over a 10-day period, and utterly typical of him, and he should probably get another MacArthur Genius
Well, that's why I bring it up, right? This is a person whose projects are produced.
Nice one, dude. I don't know anything about this guy, so I don't know if these criticisms are fair or not.
Prize that there is to win in the Western
He won
world.
more prizes in a shorter space of time than Caitlyn Jenner. Probably some of the same prizes, all those courage ones.
Well, he's won a lot. And he's going on television right now. And by the way, this book for many young people will be the only thing that they read about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, is what is contained in this book. Yes. And so it's this strange split-screen reality that I want you to comment on. Because on the one hand, as you've said, you see a vision that's sort of emerging of a different Middle East that feels almost, you could say, hopeful, despite the horrors that have happened and the horrors that will surely happen in the coming days. But on the other hand, it's a very different reality sitting here in America. Coates' book being only one example of this phenomenon. The reality is that, there are people in this room who are students at Columbia University who lost their friends and their reputations and didn't get good grades because their professors knew that they supported the state of Israel. That is now normative in American life. to say nothing of the physical assaults that have happened to many people on college campuses and beyond that. How do you square the maybe sight of victory for Israel abroad and the reality for Jews here in America who always believed, or at least since 1945 have believed, that this country was exceptional for us? Talk to us a little bit about how you see ascendant anti-Semitism, normalized anti-Semitism, and what can be done about it.
Well, one of the things I was very struck about in Israel after the 7th was delegations started to come through from America and Canada and Britain and elsewhere. Delegations of Jews and Christians and others just trying to show support, really. Often doing menial tasks like picking fruit in the south that needed picking and that sort of thing. A large number of them I found would say things over dinner or over drink or whatever, something along the following lines. I can't understand what's happened, Douglas. I'm a liberal. I was there for Me Too. I was there for BLM. But after the 7th, no one was there for me. And I always said the same thing, which was, welcome.
What do you mean by that?
That was always going to be the case. You're a fool to think that BLM didn't go the way it did, or that Occupy Wall Street wouldn't go. Why do all these movements go to anti-Semitism straight away? They're rancid movements. They're rancid movements based on half-truths and
Yeah,
lies.
BLM is a real anti-Semitic movement,
Everything
real
based on that.
rancid
Always
anti-Semitic
a
movement, really.
supreme paranoid lie, which is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a psychosis that human beings are very vulnerable to, and the Jews' tragedy is that they provide such an easy excuse for people who are failing in their lives in all sorts of ways. And as I've often said, the amazing thing about anti-Semitism is the Jews can simultaneously be accused of being rich and of being poor, of being integrated and not integrating enough, and of being stateless and of having a state. But, in a line I've been trying to popularize in the last year from Vasily Grossman, everywhere it tells you nothing about the Jews. What it tells you about is the person who suffers from anti-Semitism. And as Grossman says, tell me what you accuse the Jews of, I'll tell you what you're guilty of. Let me give you the supreme example of that. The Arab world and the Muslim world accuses Israel of being a colonial state.
I mean,
It's so funny.
I feel like that's the fairest criticism.
Islam is one of the great colonial projects in history.
It doesn't
In
preclude that Israel was basically a settler colonial society at first.
Well,
Like,
expanded through violent colonialism. Now, that doesn't mean that all Muslims approve of that or love it, but they certainly live in the history of that. The Ottoman empires and all of these are all colonial movements. The whole Islam is a colonial movement. And they have the gall to say that the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland, where they existed long before Muhammad's mother came around, should be regarded as the colonial power. This doesn't tell you anything about Israel, it tells you about the Muslim and Arab world. They are colonialists, so they accuse Israel of being colonialists. But the case, the very, very interesting case,
Yeah, I know, yeah.
psychiatrists and psychologists in New York could not work out, if you got them all together, of the American student mind. Well, that is very interesting. And I'd say a couple of things. The first is, these are young people searching for a cause, and they've been given a cause by wicked people. And they'll have to decide in their lives what they think about that.
I don't completely disagree with that one.
You are chanting for something like the suicide bomber who went into a university in Jerusalem 20 years ago and detonated in a cafe, killing American students among others. Are you happy with that? Are you happy with that? When you say you want the intifada everywhere, do you really mean you want your fellow students to be blown up whilst buying a cappuccino?
They mean they want
Like, have you thought about this?
freedom for the oppressed Palestinians. They want their resistance. The resistance of the domination of the bourgeoisie.
At all? Are you this morally frivolous or wicked? So, by the way, these are people who have joined a losing side. This is very important to stress. They've joined a losing side. They have joined a death cult. They have joined a death cult. They celebrate a death cult. When they celebrate and reiterate mottos shouted by Hamas and Hezbollah, they should know that the people they're shouting support for are in the dust now. I suppose some of these people have got fed up of sending wreaths by now. Maybe they should have loyalty cards within Deflora. Send flowers to all of the people they worshipped who are no more. Their horrible belief is going the way that anti-Semitic death cults have gone throughout history. There is a reason why people abhor the Nazis. They were the same type of people, and they were ground into the dust of history. Hamas, Hezbollah,
Not last.
will go as well. And these young people who decided to spend their formative years fasting or shitting into a bucket in the middle of Columbia University while saying they were doing it for Hamas, well done, guys. Well done. Your movement was less fragrant than it seemed.
Those people who are shouting intifada are not thinking of the people murdered in the Hebrew cafeteria. They're thinking, I was told this is what it means to be on the right side of history.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's what
they were told they were on the right side of history as they were chasing Jews across campus shouting, "Go back to Poland." Do you think you might have been the bad guys?
Oh, fuck. That fell. To be fair, like, how many students were really chanting "Go back to Poland"? Like, like, clearly there's people who just, like, think that, like, there's a fucking, something, like, they see a lot of dead people and they're like, oh, genocide, bad. They see the fucking racist statements that some Israeli fucking cabinet members make and they're like, oh, genocide, bad, evil, stop it. And they understandably don't want to give arms to these people. So, you know, I feel like
you think
you have to tank easy out of
Do
progressives.
about the
Yeah,
fact, though, that
basically.
This is one of a lot of alarming statistics.
Me in 10
51%
years.
of
How do I make a
Americans between the ages of
crackhead?
18 and 24, all of them with an IV right into TikTok, I'm sure, said that Israel believed that Israel should
True.
be ended and given to Hamas and the Palestinians. Just as a practical matter, we can sit here and say, haha, they're shitting in buckets, haha, they're idiots. That's the next generation of American citizens. What do we do about that?
We need to be
First
more
thing
to
is,
authoritarian leftist. Well, sure.
we should pray they never get what they want. Pray they never get what they want. If they got what they wanted for and what they chant for, they would end up waking up and realizing that they were the Nazis. Hamas, Hezbollah, the regime in Tehran. This is no overstatement for once, wishes to finish the work of Adolf Hitler in our time. If they managed, if Iran
Yeah,
got the
exactly.
nuclear bomb and the Ayatollahs used it, that's it. And the Jewish people who survived Pharaoh and the Babylonians and the Assyrians and the Romans and Mengele would have been done in our own time. You sure you'd be happy to live with that? Young Columbia student? So no, I pray that they never, for many reasons, that they never get what they say they want.
But I think one of the alarming lessons of the past decade, or at least one lesson I'm learning, I'm sure you know it years before me, is I always used to comfort myself in a certain sense by saying, oh, people grow out of it. People grow out of it. And I don't feel that way anymore. I don't see people just naturally growing out of something that is being reinforced by so many.
You know what? There's this funny. Who is it from? I think it was from The Atlantic. The elite college students who can't read books. I read this today. This was interesting. But I'm often require students to read a book, sometimes a very long one, a long and dense one in just a week or two. But the student told Emrys that at her public high school, she had never been required to read an entire book. She had been assigned experts, poetry, news articles, but not a single book cover to cover. Apparently, like, so many less schools are requiring people to actually read full books because they just like doing they read excerpts and they do the excerpts excerpt. I can't pronounce it. And because that's, you can immediately test it. You know, it's just for the format of maybe I'll let him inside. Let him in. You want to let the squirrel in. You can like immediately test that, and it's like more for the format of the fucking like standardized test. And provides informational text and standardized test. Teachers at school shifted from books to informal passages, followed by questions about the author's main idea, mimicking the format of standardized reading comprehension. And yeah, like I think he also says like students have a hard time actually. They have a hard time reading whole text, and they have a hard time paying attention to like specific details while also getting the main idea. Which, like, I mean, I'm not like a particularly good reader especially when it comes to fiction. I read boring shit, and I'm able to understand most of it to do Hasbro. That's the extent of my reading, clearly.
Of the institutions in their lives, by the people they admire, not just by their professors, but by many people in the culture who let these lies go unchallenged.
Yeah, as I say, there's a lot of rot in the culture. There's a lot of rot in institutions.
Well, you said earlier that we're kind of drunk on peace, or the way a lot of other people have said it is we're a decadent society. Like, is it going to take something catastrophic
It will take a
happening
mass
to us?
casualty terror attack. Probably, sadly. You know, there's a line from T.S. Eliot, that rather sobering line in Murder in the Cathedral, where he says, we do not know very much about the future, except from generation to generation, do the same thing again and again. Men learn little. And yeah, I think that most likely a mass casualty terror attack would be about the only thing that would bring the reality of this home. I mean, if these students who do this, if they realize that they had any imagination, if they had any sympathy or empathy, can they imagine that? Of course they don't imagine. Imagine that the Nova Party had taken place in New York. Imagine that at 6:30 in the morning.
What, New York isn't next to a open air prison concentration. If you're going to a music festival and enjoying music next to a big concentration camp, then you're an evil person. Dude, I have not been playing dressing room. I'm gonna lose this one by a lot.
It started to land over your head.
Gotta go. I'll see you hopefully tomorrow.
Big
Totally done. Thanks for stopping by. Bye.
With machine guns and Kalashnikovs.
I appreciate it.
Came and raped your friends in front of you, and then killed them in front of you, and then came for you next. And in your last moments, that was what you saw. One of the, without getting too gruesome, but let me just perhaps do so for once to hit home the point. One of the people who I interviewed who had been in the Nova Party had said at one point that there was a young girl on her knees. One of the Hamas terrorists had killed her best friend in front of her. And they were debating whether or not they should take her into Gaza or kill her. And she was screaming, "Please don't kill me, please don't kill me." And they shot her through the face, and she was still shouting that when her face fell off. That's what these guys are. Does any student in America understand this, or can have any understanding that these people would do that to them? My just prayer is that they don't, that they're simply lacking in imagination. But if this happened to them, and if this happened to them, and they, like the Nova survivors, came to New York for an exhibition about the Nova Party, and then they find in the streets of New York outside the exhibit American students and others chanting support for the people who did this to their friends, I don't know how some of these, they're so brave, these young people, to still be going around the world telling their story. When they go around much of the world and they meet people they tell their story to, who are supporting the people who did it. This is a level of human evil I don't think that, human lack of empathy perhaps I can say, that is beyond my comprehension. I just want to say one other thing on that. We have seen something like this.
Don't you have empathy for the 50% of children that have been killed in Gaza, the 30,000 dead children in Gaza?
Before. We saw it in the...
Clearly, exactly, morally equivalent.
Decided to take up the cause of the PLO. You know, very interestingly, one of the things about the Entebbe raid that people don't realize...
You're back for 1 second.
Two of the hijackers were members of the German left.
Everyone already said bye.
Former foreign minister.
Can't be back.
True.
Not allowed.
And they
also say bye again.
World War II. There was one thing they wouldn't be, which was they wouldn't be Nazis. And this is quite a good idea. It's a good orienting principle, you know. Don't be Nazis. But I just want to stress that even that isn't enough on its own. Not with other moral cause to you. Not with other things in your system. Because by the 60s, PLO...
Between the world and me.
All those groups. Some of the German left fell into that. And one of the things about the Entebbe hijacking, which is not well enough known, is that when the plane was landed in Uganda, the main hijacker, the German leftist, sorted out the passengers, Jews and non-Jews. Mm-hmm. Jews and non-Jews. Now, it wasn't just Israelis and non-Israelis. They got the American Jews into the line with the other Jews. And there was a man on the plane at Entebbe, one of several people on the plane who was a Holocaust survivor. And as he heard this German left-winger shouting orders to the Jews after the selection process, he showed his tattoo from the camp.
5 stars.
And said, "I had thought that people had changed." And the hijacker has been quoted by several people present as having said to that man, "I'm not a Nazi, I'm an idealist." We've seen these people before. But we've seen them off before.
I wondered before we go to questions, you've met so many people in your time.
I mean...
You've talked to...
I just have a tendency, like anti-establishment people just have like a tendency to like...
Leaders. You shared an image I don't think any of us will ever forget about...
To share overly broad... overly broad data, we'll say.
I wondered if you could give us...
Paint an overly broad picture of things.
Because one of the things you talked about when you recently won the Alexander Hamilton Award is you've said that your friends have commented to you that you've changed since October 7th. And the way that you've changed is that you're actually less pessimistic. Mm-hmm. So give us some reasons that you've left some of that pessimism behind. Maybe through some people that you've met.
Are you kidding me? She won. All right, bye for real this time, hopefully. Or I don't mean hopefully as in I hope you don't come back or anything.
A rather personal thing, as you said before. There was rocketing in the north, and I hadn't been under any serious bombardment before. I'd seen stuff in Iraq and elsewhere. And I remember coming back from a day in the north where there was being rocketing, as there was again recently in the town of Safar. And I thought something very strange when I got home, which was I thought I could look my grandparents in the face. And what I mean by that is...
Can you link the vid I'm watching right now? This?
There's always the question, would we be able to do what our grandparents had done? You know, living through the Blitz in London, night after night, and not losing their faith and not losing their strength. And I used to hear stories of that, terrible stories. when I was growing up, of what that was like, and from those who went and fought, the ones who didn't come back. And in my country of birth, Great Britain, like in America, every country is filled with family stories. My grandmother on my father's side lost her father in the First War and then her brothers in the Second, and always fighting the Germans. And every family was like that. And it was always this question of, if the time of trial came, would we be up to it? And that was what, just in my small little way that day, I remember thinking. I got a little taste of what my forebears went through. Tiniest one. But everyone in the West, somewhere in our back of our heads, has this thing. And Israelis had it. Always. Until, there was always a thing, since 1973 in particular, and the first Lebanon War, second Lebanon War. Always this question of, are the young people going to be up to it? And I have so much admiration and pride and so much more that this generation of young Israelis were put to the test, and they've been magnificent.
Do you believe this guy?
What these young women do on
for
a daily
what?
basis, from the south of Gaza to the mountains of Lebanon and Syria in the north, and they don't.
I don't agree with him on everything. I disagree with him on a few things in the video. In terms of what he's talking about right now, I feel like I don't know. Like, he's gonna know more about. Do you believe he was correct on what? That doesn't help at all. What an unbelievably dumb clarification. Correct about what? Yeah, great clarification, dude. I don't know. Obviously not with everything. He's obviously like to the fucking right-wing Netanyahu. Do you think he's right? He's probably. I would assume that there are more protests in Israel now than there have been before. So, his point about young people, being up for the challenge might be less correct than he's saying it is. Just because Israel has had massive protests against Netanyahu prior to October 7th for the judicial reform stuff, and I know post October 7th there's been protests even by the hostages' families against Netanyahu. So I don't know, and calling for a ceasefire because they want the hostages back. So I don't know. I don't know if he's entirely correct, but he's going to know more about this specific thing than I do. So
any of it with hatred in their hearts.
One word answer, please.
Just some of what they've had to do is just beyond description. But they do it from love of their country, love of their people, love of their tradition, defense of their people, defense of their tradition. They know that they are fighting for the Jewish people as their forebears have before, but this time with a state, with an army, with an air force. And they've stepped up to this moment, and they have been extraordinary. People will write books about this generation. And I just say, the best thing about it is that it should tell us that there is also a better way. There is a better way than this nihilism and hatred which has been bred in America. There is something else other than this culture of resentment and failure, and it is failure. There is something better than this culture of grievance and I don't have enough, or someone else must have something. As Ronald Reagan said once, this idea that if there's a fat man standing by the side of a thin man, it must mean the fat man took something from the thin man. There is something else than this thing that has ended up in the last year being a celebration of a death cult. There is such a thing as gratitude instead of resentment, pride instead of envy, and pride in
I want to know you're an anti-Semite. If you're an anti-Semite or Islamophobe,
and your faith and your community,
obviously no other options here. Well. True. So I think I said that horribly wrong. Islamophobe.
A number of people, but anyone who feels down from spending too much time with people in America should come to Israel, and you will see that, among other things, the people who thought the next generation of Israelis just wanted to party were wrong. And it turned out not to be an
I do
thing.
kind of are mandated to join the military, so.
And that's what they're showing.
Damn. What the fuck? Nah. I would assume if I look up October 7th, Israel protests. I try to look up Israel protests, maybe. I don't know. Oh, it's all gonna be shit in America. I don't know, but I would assume there's probably more protests about this war than there were about most other wars Israel has engaged in, saving maybe the who is Israel's female Israel the Yom Kippur War, probably female prime minister with this girl, right? Not the Yom Kippur War, the War of Attrition, right? If you want to chat with me live, sub here or go to Nonfon 420 on Twitch or Kick via the links below. Once again, please like and sub to help with the algorithm, and consider sending a donation through YouTube Super Thanks to directly support me, and I'll make sure to reply to any question you ask. See you guys next time.